The grand chancellery of the Xylo's hegemony was a monument to stillness. Carved from the heart of a mountain of living obsidian on Xylo's prime, its cavernous ceiling was a cosmos of captured starlight. Each glimmering point, a system brought under the mandate of dominion over 10,000 cycles of conquest and consolidation. Silence was the primary architecture here. The weight of history was a physical pressure that muted sound and slowed breath. In the center of the immense, circular chamber, a holographic projection of the galaxy turned with imperceptible grace, a swirling river of light and dust. It was this map that held the gaze of the hegemony's High Council, and it was a single, insignificant stain upon its otherwise pristine frontier that had fractured their ancient calm. A blemish of angry, vibrant crimson, pulsating softly on the edge of the Cygnus Veil. It represented a species that called itself humanity. High Counselor Valerius stood apart from the others, his multifaceted eyes tracing the borders of the anomaly. His chitinous plates, the color of aged ivory and etched with the lineage of his clan, felt unusually tight. He was old enough to remember the last unification war, old enough to have seen the galaxy bleed before the hegemony's peace had been imposed. This new development was different. It was not a roar of defiance or the clang of a rising empire challenging their own. It was a whisper, and whispers in the silent halls of power were far more terrifying than shouts. For millennia, every emerging species had followed a predictable pattern. They discovered fire, then the wheel, then the atom, then the stars. Upon reaching the galactic stage, they broadcast their existence with arrogant pride, their signals a cacophony of raw power and youthful ambition. They built fleets, drew borders, and made threats. They were loud, and they were understandable. They were children throwing stones in a giant's garden, and the hegemony in its wisdom would either guide them or crush them. But these humans, they were quiet. Their expansion had been a ghost's passage. Systems on the fringe, long deemed worthless and barren, had blinked into habitation without preamble. There were no grand declarations, no triumphant signals, no fleets of jagged warships carving up territory. There was only a slow, creeping presence, detected not by its noise, but by the sudden, unnerving silence of the void it occupied. The background radiation would dip, the chaotic chatter of stellar phenomena would smooth into an unnatural calm. It was as if they drew a blanket of absolute serenity over whatever they touched. They had appeared at the edge of the Veil of Cygnus, a treacherous nebula the hegemony had long used as a natural barrier, and they had simply settled. Their presence was an intellectual problem, a philosophical paradox that the hegemony's rigid, honor-bound culture was ill-equipped to solve. They were an equation with no known variables. They mock us with their silence, Archonthrax boomed, his voice, unlike the chamber, refusing to be subdued. His carapace was the color of volcanic rock, scarred and pitted from youthful campaigns. He was the fist of the council, the embodiment of the hegemony's martial pride. They trespass upon our demarcated frontier, a border sanctified by the blood of our ancestors, and they do not even grant us the courtesy of a challenge. This is not ignorance, it is contempt. Thrax gestured a powerful, three-jointed limb towards the pulsating red of the human sector. For cycles we have observed, we have listened, and we have received nothing but the void's own breath. Are we to believe a species capable of interstellar travel is without a voice? No, they are hiding, they are plotting. Like parasites, they burrow into the forgotten corners of the galaxy, and we, the guardians of order, are expected to simply allow it. I say we send the Grand Armada. We will force a response. We will show them what it means to stand in the shadow of the hegemony. A murmur of assent rippled through the assembled counselors, their iridescent carapaces shifting in the low light. The logic was sound, for it was their logic, the only logic they had ever known. Power respected power. A show of force was the traditional dialogue of the galaxy, a language every species, from the silicon life of the core worlds to the gas seers of the outer arms, understood implicitly. To not display one's strength was to admit one had none. Valerius turned his gaze from the map to Thrax, his ancient mind sifting through millennia of diplomatic precedent, of wars won and lost, of empires risen and turned to dust. Thrax saw a military problem requiring a military solution. Valerius saw a phenomenon that defied their understanding of life itself. The hegemony was untouchable, a colossus whose feet were planted in the bedrock of history. They had never faced an enemy they could not comprehend. Their might was absolute. Their technology the pinnacle of 100 centuries of refinement. Their warships could crack continents, their wormhole projectors could stitch the galaxy to their will. They were the architects of galactic peace, a peace built upon the undeniable truth of their supremacy. And yet, this quiet, unassuming species made his core tremble with an unfamiliar sensation. It was not fear. It was uncertainty, a far more corrosive acid to the soul of a Xylos. Your solution is a hammer, Archon, Valerius said, his voice a low thrum that seemed to vibrate in the very stone of the floor. And you see every problem as a nail. You assume their silence is a weakness or a prelude to attack. What if it is neither? What if it is a sign of something else entirely? A sign of a discipline we cannot fathom, a confidence so absolute it requires no announcement. He let his words hang in the oppressive silence. The council was an organism of tradition. New ideas were treated as pathogens. Every species we have encountered has sought to expand its territory, to hoard resources, to bellow its name into the cosmos. It is the fundamental law of life as we have defined it. These humans defy that law. Their settled worlds are not grand industrial forges or military outposts. Our deepest scans reveal worlds that are balanced. They seem to take only what they need. They build in harmony with their environment, not in spite of it. Their energy signatures are bafflingly low, almost non-existent, yet they support thriving populations. This is not the behavior of a young, aggressive race. It is the behavior of something else. Wisdom, is that what you imply, Valerius? Sneered another counselor, Lyra, whose polished obsidian shell was adorned with filaments of pure energy. That these primitives, who have only just left their cradle, possess a wisdom that has eluded us for 10,000 cycles. They are weak. They are timid. They hide in the dark because they fear the light of our hegemony. Fear does not create the patterns we have observed, Valerius countered, his gaze sweeping over them all. Fear is loud, it is erratic, it builds walls and sharpens spears. What we are seeing is control. An absolute terrifying level of self-control, to move so far so fast and yet to do so with such subtlety. It suggests a mastery over their own nature, over their technology, that we should not be so quick to dismiss. To send the Armada is to play a game whose rules we do not know. We would arrive, a fleet of thunder and fire, and what would we find? An empty system, a silent world that refuses to answer. We would be a roaring behemoth trying to swat a phantom. We would look like fools. Or worse, we would provoke a response we are not prepared for. He gestured to the star map. The hegemony is eternal because we are patient. We are strong, but our greatest strength has always been our knowledge. We study, we learn, and then we act. We do not strike blindly into the dark. This silence from the humans is a message in itself. It says, we are not like you. Your rules do not apply to us. Before we send our warriors, we must first send our minds. We must understand what they are. To do otherwise is an act of arrogance, and arrogance has been the tombstone of every fallen empire. The debate raged for hours, a slow, grinding war of philosophies. Thrax and his faction spoke of honor, of dominion, of the necessity of projecting strength to maintain order. They painted humanity as a potential contagion, a rogue element that could disrupt the delicate balance of power the hegemony had so painstakingly constructed. Valerius and the few who sided with him spoke of caution, of the unknown, of the hubris in believing that their own experience encompassed all possibilities of existence. He felt the tide of opinion turning against him. The council was a body built for action, and his call for patience was seen as a form of weakness. They had ruled for so long, unopposed and unchallenged, that they had forgotten what it felt like to be uncertain. They thought they were untouchable. In the end, a compromise was reached, though it felt to Valerius like a defeat. A fleet would be sent, not the Grand Armada, but a significant battle group, a flotilla of their most formidable cruisers and destroyers, vessels that had pacified entire star systems. It would be commanded by Thrax himself. They would not attack. They would advance to the edge of the human-claimed sector in the Vale of Cygnus, and they would wait. They would project their power, their very presence a demand for acknowledgement. They would create a crisis, forcing the humans to reveal their nature. As the resolution was passed, the great crystal chimes of the Chancellery rang out, sealing the decision. Valerius looked at the serene, swirling galaxy above him, then at the angry red stain on its edge, and felt a profound sense of foreboding. The hegemony was about to knock on a door without knowing what eye behind it, and for the first time in his long life, he was not certain they would be prepared for what answered. The Xylo's fleet tore through the fabric of spacetime, exiting the shimmering mouth of a wormhole with the brutal elegance of a predator. Their arrival was a symphony of cosmic violence. Space itself groaned under the strain as dozens of mountain-sized vessels materialized, their dark, angular hulls drinking the light of the distant nebula. They were a wall of iron and fire, each ship a masterpiece of destructive potential, their weapon ports aglow with contained energy, their sensor arrays already screaming data back to Xylo's prime. Archon Thrax stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable Will, a vessel whose name embodied the very soul of the hegemony. The view screen before him was a tapestry of swirling magenta and cyan gas clouds, the veil of Cygnus, and within it the silent, waiting systems of the humans. For days they held their position, a silent, imposing line of battle. It was a posture of intimidation, a display of power meant to awe and terrify. The sheer energy radiating from their fleet was enough to disrupt local star systems, a passive broadcast of their immense capabilities. They scanned, they listened, they waited. And the humans remained silent. The unnatural calm within their territory persisted. Their energy signatures remained whisper-thin. It was as if the Xylos fleet was not there at all, as if a gathering of gods had assembled and the mortals below had not even bothered to look up. Thrax grew more agitated with each passing cycle. This was not how the galaxy worked. Inferior powers groveled, equals postured, superiors dictated. This was nothing. It was an insult delivered through sheer, infuriating apathy. On the third day, something finally happened, but it was not what they expected. There was no fleet emerging to meet them, no hail of frantic diplomacy, no desperate plea or defiant challenge. Instead, on the edge of the Xylos' sensor range, a distortion occurred. It was not the violent tear of a wormhole, nor the brutal shove of a conventional hyperdrive. It was a gentle, seamless folding of reality. One moment there was empty space. The next, a ship was there. A single ship. It was small, impossibly small compared to the behemoths of the Xylos fleet. It was a smooth, featureless vessel of pearlescent white, shaped like a polished river stone. It had no visible weapon ports, no glowing engine arrays, no aggressive angles. It simply floated there, serene and solitary against the backdrop of the nebula, a mote of dust before a tidal wave. A wave of confusion washed over the bridge of the indomitable will. The ship's very existence was a paradox. The logs showed no entry vector, no energy spike, no gravitational anomaly. It had not traveled through space to get there. It had simply arrived. The physics of its appearance were a quiet, profound refutation of everything the Xylos understood about faster-than-light travel. Their wormhole technology was a blunt instrument, punching holes in reality to create shortcuts. This was different. This was the work of a surgeon, not a butcher. A communications request came through. It was not a broad, powerful broadcast, but a tightly focused, laser-thin beam directed solely at Thrax's flagship. It was polite. It was precise. It was unnerving. Thrax, his mandibles clicking in agitation, ordered the channel opened. The main view screen shimmered and the image of a human appeared. It was a female of their species, her features soft where a Xylos' S were sharp, her skin unarmored and pale. She sat in a simple chair in a room of stark, minimalist design. There were no symbols of rank, no displays of power. Behind her was only a plain, gray wall. Her expression was one of measured calm. "This is Ambassador Evelyn Reed of the Terran Confederacy," she said, her voice even and without inflection. It was translated instantly by the ship's computer, but the serene tone needed no translation. "You have entered a region of our observational study. We respectfully request you state your intentions." Thrax felt a surge of indignation, the sheer audacity of it. This lone creature in its fragile-looking vessel was questioning him, the commander of a hegemony battle group. He stepped forward, his immense form filling the view of his own ship's transmitter. "I am Archon Thrax of the Xylos hegemony. We are the rightful stewards of this galaxy. It is you who are in violation of our established borders. Your presence here is an act of aggression. Your silence has been taken as a sign of contempt. Explain yourselves, or we will interpret your trespass as a declaration of war." The human, Reed, did not flinch. Her gaze remained steady. "We have declared no war, Archon. We have not trespassed. This region of space was unclaimed and uninhabited by any sentient life according to all galactic records. We are a species of scientists and explorers. The unique properties of this nebula are of great interest to us. We have no quarrel with the Xylos hegemony. We seek only to observe and to learn." "Lies," Thrax roared, the speakers on the human's end likely crackling under the strain. "All species seek conquest. It is the nature of life. You build your strength in the shadows to strike from them. You will find we are not so easily blinded." Ambassador Reed was silent for a long moment, her eyes seeming to study Thrax not as an enemy, but as a complex specimen. It was a gaze of analysis, not fear. "Your perspective is based on your own history, Archon," she said, her voice still impossibly calm. "You assume your nature is the nature of all. Perhaps it is not. We have found the universe is far more varied than any single philosophy can contain. We do not seek what you possess. We do not want your worlds, your resources, or your power. We want only understanding." The sheer sincerity in her voice was more disorienting than any threat. It was a concept so alien to the Xylo's mindset of dominion and control that it bordered on madness. Understanding. What was there to understand that could be more valuable than a star system, more powerful than an armada? Thrax felt his certainty beginning to fray at the edges. This was not the exchange he had prepared for. He had expected arrogance or fear or deceit. He was being met with a patient, logical calmness that his aggression could find no purchase on. Words are meaningless, Thrax spat. Your capabilities are unknown, your intentions are suspect. You will withdraw from the veil of Cygnus immediately. This is your only warning. For the first time, a flicker of something shifted in the ambassador's expression. It was not fear, but perhaps a touch of disappointment. It seems we are at an impasse of perspective, she said softly. You see our presence as a threat because you cannot conceive of it being anything else. You require a demonstration of what you call capabilities to contextualize us. Very well, we do not wish for conflict. Conflict is a waste of energy and potential. Allow me to offer a different kind of demonstration. One not of aggression, but of principle. Please direct your most advanced sensors at our vessel. All of them. Record everything. A warning klaxon sounded in Thrax's mind. Was this a trap? A prelude to the deployment of some exotic weapon? His tactical officers looked at him, their own multifaceted eyes wide with uncertainty. But to refuse would be a sign of fear. Do it, Thrax commanded. The Xylo's fleet poured a torrent of sensor energy over the small human ship, probing it with every technology they possessed. Graviton imagers, quantum foam analyzers, subspace resonance detectors. The data that flooded their systems was confusing. The ship seemed to have no power core of conventional design. Its energy signature was almost biological, a low, steady hum that was anathema to the roaring fusion reactors that powered the hegemony's fleet. We are going to perform a short-range translocation, Ambassador Reed's voice continued, as calm as a lecturer in a classroom. Please observe the method. It is the foundation of our philosophy. On the view screen, the small, white ship did something impossible. It did not ignite engines. It did not open a wormhole. For a fraction of a second, it seemed to lose its physical integrity, its form blurring into a soft-edged cloud of light. And then it was gone. A moment later, it reappeared 1,000 kilometers to its former position, solidifying back into its serene, river-stone shape. The entire event was silent, seamless, and utterly graceful. On the bridge of the indomitable will, there was a stunned silence. The sensor data was being processed, and what it revealed sent a shockwave through the assembled crew. The ship hadn't moved through space. It had momentarily changed the coordinates of its own existence. It had treated the three-dimensional universe as a sheet of parchment, and had simply folded it, bringing two distant points together, and then unfolded it. It was a form of travel so advanced, so elegant, it made the hegemony's violent, space-daring wormholes look like the work of savages throwing rocks. The energy expenditure was almost zero. The stress on the fabric of reality was non-existent. The data was relayed instantly back to the High Council on Xylo's Prime. Valerius watched the playback in his private chamber, his old heart thrumming. He summoned the hegemony's chief theoretical physicist, an ancient Xylos whose mind was a living library of cosmic science. The physicist watched the data stream, his appendages trembling as he cross-referenced it with long-abandoned, heretical theories. "It cannot be," the physicist whispered, his voice filled with a terrifying awe. "We dismissed this. The equations were considered a paradox, a philosophical dead end. It requires a complete, unified understanding of quantum mechanics and general relativity, a level of comprehension we believe to be unattainable. They are not simply manipulating spacetime, High Counselor. They are conversing with it. This is not engineering. This is art." Valerius understood. The implication was staggering, a blow to the very core of their identity. The hegemony's power was based on brute force. They bent the universe to their will through overwhelming energy and superior firepower. These humans, they did not bend the universe. They seemed to ask it, and the universe seemed to consent. A species that had mastered this level of physics did not need fleets of warships. A single vessel like the one Thrax faced could be anywhere at any time. It could appear in the heart of their most fortified starbase, or in the skies above Xylo's Prime itself, without warning and without any means of being stopped. Their vast armada was useless, a collection of iron clubs against a being that could teleport. They were not facing a rival empire. They were facing a species that operated on a completely different plane of existence. The humans' silence was not contempt. It was the quiet confidence of a master who felt no need to boast of his skill to an apprentice. Back at the Vale of Cygnus, Thrax was frozen, his mind unable to process the tactical nightmare that had just unfolded. All his bluster, all his threats, now seemed like the foolish posturing of a child. Ambassador Reed's image was still on his screen, her expression unchanged. "We are not your enemies, Archon Thrax," she said, her calm voice now carrying the weight of undeniable authority. "Our path is a different one. We seek to understand the universe, not to rule it. We hope you will come to see that. We will await your council's considered response." The communication link closed. The small, white ship remained where it was, a silent testament to a power so profound it had no need for aggression. Thrax stood on his bridge, surrounded by the mightiest warships in the galaxy, and for the first time in the hegemony's long, proud history, he understood what it was to feel utterly, hopelessly outmatched. He had been sent to demand answers, and instead he had been given a lesson in humility that would shake the foundations of his civilization. The emergency session of the High Council convened in an atmosphere of stunned, profound silence. The grandeur of the Chancellery now felt hollow, its obsidian walls a cage of their own arrogance. The holographic galaxy above seemed to mock them, a vast, complex tapestry they had only ever perceived in a single color. The data from Thrax's encounter had been disseminated and verified by every scientific mind in the hegemony. The conclusion was inescapable, and it had shattered 100 centuries of dogma. Humanity was not a primitive upstart. They were, by any measurable standard of scientific and philosophical advancement, their superiors. The realization had a chilling effect, extinguishing the fiery rhetoric of the war faction and plunging even the most hardened traditionalists into a state of deep, uncomfortable introspection. Archon Thrax stood before them, his report delivered, his usual booming confidence replaced by a somber, humbled gravity. He did not speak of insults or honor, but of physics and philosophy. He described the human ambassador's unnerving calm, the impossible grace of their technology, and the terrifying chasm of understanding that separated their two species. When he finished, the silence that followed was heavier than stone. It was the sound of an empire reevaluating its own existence. It was Valerius who finally spoke, his voice resonating with the weight of the moment. "We have stood for millennia upon a mountain of our own creation, believing it to be the highest peak in the universe. Today, we have learned that we are in a valley, and we have only just seen the shadow of a true mountain looming over us. The question is no longer what we will do to the humans, but what we will learn from them." He turned to the other counselors, his multifaceted eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "Their ambassador has offered dialogue. She awaits our considered response. I propose that we give her one. I will go to the Vale of Cygnus. I will meet with this Ambassador Reed not as a conqueror demanding tribute, but as an equal seeking to understand." There was no opposition. Thrax, the former voice of war, bowed his head in agreement. The hegemony's pride had been a formidable shield, but it had been pierced not by a weapon, but by a simple, undeniable truth. The council's vote was unanimous. Valerius would go, not with a war fleet, but with a single diplomatic barge, a gesture of peace and respect. He was to be the bridge across the chasm. When Valerius's vessel arrived at the designated coordinates, the human ship was waiting, a solitary pearl against the velvet of space. He was invited aboard. The transition was seamless, a shimmer of light, and he found himself standing not in a sterile airlock, but in a calm, open reception area. The air was clean, the light soft. The interior of the human ship was as minimalist and profound as its exterior. There were no hard angles, no visible machinery, only smooth, flowing surfaces and walls that seemed to display soft, ambient light. It felt less like a machine and more like a place of contemplation. Ambassador Evelyn Reed was there to greet him. In person, she was smaller than he had imagined, her form lacking the natural armor and physical imposition of a Xylos. Yet she carried an aura of quiet authority that 1,000 generations of hegemony breeding could not replicate. She inclined her head in a gesture of respect. "High Counselor Valerius," she said, her voice the same serene melody he had heard in the recordings. "We are honored by your presence. Thank you for coming." "The honor is mine, Ambassador," Valerius replied, his own voice formal and deep. "I have come to correct a grave misunderstanding on the part of my people. We have allowed our history to become the lens through which we view all things. It has, I now see, made us blind." She led him through the ship. They passed not barracks or armories, but areas that Valerius's translator identified as laboratories, observation decks, and meditation chambers. Crew members, humans of various appearances, moved with a quiet, focused purpose. They would pause, offer a nod of acknowledgement to the ambassador and her guest, and then continue their work. There was no fear, no hostility, only a sense of calm, scholarly curiosity. It was the atmosphere of a monastery, not a warship. They finally entered a room at the ship's apex. One entire wall was a transparent viewport looking out upon the breathtaking vista of the Vale of Cygnus. In the center of the room, two simple chairs faced the view. "Please," Reed invited, gesturing to one of the chairs. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the cosmic clouds churn and glow. For the Xylos, such a nebula was a navigational hazard, a tactical obstacle. For the humans, Valerius realized, it was an object of beauty, a source of wonder. "You must understand," Valerius began, breaking the comfortable silence. "My species achieved dominance through strength. Our unification was a long and bloody process. We brought peace to the galaxy, but it was a peace forged in fire. We came to believe that this was the only way. That power must be displayed, that territory must be claimed, that silence is a prelude to violence. You have shown us that this is not a universal truth. It is only our truth." "Every species is a product of its own journey," Reed replied, her eyes still on the nebula. "Humanity's journey was also fraught with conflict. We nearly destroyed ourselves and our world on multiple occasions. We learned a difficult lesson from our own history, Counselor. We learned that the pursuit of dominion over others is ultimately a path to self-destruction. The universe is infinitely vast and complex. To try and force it into the shape of one's own ambition is an act of profound ignorance. We chose a different path. We chose to understand, not to control. Our might, as your Archon Thrax might call it, is not in our weapons, but in our capacity to learn, to adapt, to see the universe not as a resource to be conquered, but as a text to be read." "And that is why you are here?" Valerius asked. "To read this nebula?" "In part," she said. "We are studying the formation of exotic matter in high-energy environments, but that is not the primary reason. The Vale of Cygnus has other properties, properties that make it a unique listening post." A new kind of stillness fell over Valerius. This was the heart of the matter, the final piece of the equation that had so confounded his people. Listening for what? Ambassador Reed turned her gaze from the stars to him. For the first time, her serene expression was touched by a profound, ancient gravity, a sadness that seemed to echo across eons. "For the silence, Counselor, and for what breaks it." She gestured to the wall opposite the viewport. It shimmered and transformed into a complex, three-dimensional display of swirling data. It was not a star chart, but something else, a representation of the entire electromagnetic and gravitational spectrum across vast, intergalactic distances. Most of it was a quiet, steady hum of background radiation, the normal voice of the cosmos. But Reed isolated a single, incredibly faint signal. It was a complex, repeating pattern, but it was degraded, ancient, like a whisper from a tomb. "We first detected this signal over a century ago," Reed explained, her voice low. "It does not originate from our galaxy or any of the nearby satellite galaxies. It comes from the void between galactic clusters. The signal is a recording, a final testament. We have spent decades decoding what fragments remain. It is a history, a warning, and an epitaph from a civilization that achieved a level of advancement that would make even our own seem nascent." Valerius stared at the faint, dying signal, feeling a coldness spread through his core. "A warning of what?" "Of what they called the Great Filter, or the Silence," Reed said. "They theorized that the reason the universe appears so empty of intelligent life is not because life is rare, but because something is pruning it. They believed there is a force, an entity, or a phenomenon that hunts for emerging technological civilizations, a predator on a cosmic scale." She then highlighted another, far more disturbing pattern on the display. It was not a signal, but a periodic, rhythmic pulse of nothing, a wave of absolute perfect silence that swept across the data at vast, regular intervals. It was a null signal, an anti-beacon. "This is what we have been truly studying," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This null pulse, it sweeps through intergalactic space like a searchlight. And we have correlated its appearance with the final, catastrophic cessation of other, similar ancient signals we have found. The pulse passes, and the distant whispers of old civilizations go silent forever. We believe this null pulse is the hunter. It seeks out the very signals of complex technology and life, and where it finds them, it erases them." The full, terrifying weight of her words settled upon Valerius. Humanity had not come to the Xylos border to expand or conquer. They had not come in arrogance or ignorance. They had come to the quietest, most shielded part of the galaxy they could find, using the nebula's interference as a natural cloak to study the face of galactic extinction. Their silence was not a strategy, it was a survival mechanism. Their subtle, low-energy technology was not just a matter of philosophical elegance, it was a life-or-death necessity. To be loud in this universe was to paint a target on one's own back. The epitaph signal we found it speaks of a final, desperate gambit, Reed continued. Before they were silenced, they broadcast their entire scientific and cultural history, encoded in a way they hoped would survive the filter, a message in a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean. We believe we are not the first to find one of these bottles, but we may be the first in this galaxy to understand what it means. Valerius looked out at the beautiful, swirling gases of the Veil of Cygnus, and he no longer saw beauty. He saw a hiding place. He saw the last patch of tall grass in a field where a tiger roamed. The millennia of Xylo's conquest, their grand armada, their mandate of dominion, it all seemed like the proud proclamations of a child shouting in a dark forest, unaware of the wolves listening just beyond the firelight. They had thought they were untouchable, the apex predators of their corner of the universe. They were wrong. They were simply lucky that their noisy, arrogant broadcasts had not yet been heard by what lurked in the profound, intergalactic dark. "Why tell me this?" Valerius asked, his voice hoarse with the magnitude of the revelation. "Why share this terror with us?" Ambassador Reed finally offered a small, sad smile. "Because, High Counselor, for the first time in a very long while, we have found someone else who is loud enough to be in the same danger we are. And because the signal from that long-dead civilization ended with a single repeating concept that we have come to adopt as our own first principle. Survival is only possible together. The silence is coming. It is patient, it is vast, and it is inevitable. We cannot hide from it forever. We must be ready to face it, and we cannot do that alone." Valerius stood and walked to the viewport, his reflection a stark alien form against the backdrop of the stars. The universe he had known, the universe his people had conquered and catalogued and controlled, had been a comfortable illusion. The real universe was far larger, far older, and contained horrors beyond his darkest philosophies. The human, this calm, quiet creature from a species he had dismissed as primitive, had just handed him the truth. Their mightiest warriors were not soldiers with plasma cannons. They were scientists and historians, fighting a war across eons against an enemy they could not even see. He turned back to Evelyn Reed. The chasm between their species had vanished, replaced by a bridge of shared, terrifying purpose. His people, the Xylos, were warriors. They were builders. They were strong. But they were not wise. The humans, they were wise. Together, they might stand a chance. "You are right, Ambassador," Valerius said, the words feeling momentous, the dawn of a new age for his people. "We have been shouting into the darkness for 10,000 years. It is time we learned to listen." In the grand chancellery of Xylo's prime, the great holographic map of the galaxy was changed. The angry red stain of the human territory was gone, replaced by the calm blue O. A formal alliance. But at the edge of the map, a new symbol had appeared, a faint, pulsing icon representing the signal from beyond, the warning from the deep past. It was a constant reminder that their galaxy was not an island, but a fragile shore against a vast, dark ocean. The High Council no longer debated territory or dominion. They now debated gravitational lensing and signal masking, theoretical physics and long-term survival strategies. The age of conquest was over. The age of vigilance had begun. The Xylos' hegemony had thought they were untouchable. They had been right. They were untouchable to any rival within their galaxy. But the universe was larger than their ambitions, and the real threat had never been a neighbor. It had been the silence between the stars, and now they would not face it alone.